Committee on Oversight and Government Reform will come to order. The committee meets today to consider House H.R. 5492, the Inspector General Empowerment Act, H.R. 5229, the Wounded Warriors Federal Leave Act of 2014, and several postal namings. The committee will now consider H.R. 5492, the Inspector General Empowerment Act. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 5492, a bill to amend the Inspector General Act of 1978 to strengthen the independence of the Inspectors General and for other purposes.
Without objection, H.R. 5492 will be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. The text has already been distributed and is in each of your folders. I'll now recognize myself for a short opening statement. Inspector General, or IGs, play a key role in improving our government's efficiency. They conduct investigations and audits to prevent and detect waste, fraud, and mismanagement in their agencies and in the programs they oversee. They help Congress to shape legislation and target our oversight and investigative activities. The IGs have proven to be one of Congress's best investments. In the last fiscal year alone, the IG community used their $2.7 billion budget to identify potential cost savings to taxpayers totaling about $46.3 billion. That means that for every dollar in the IG budget, they identify at least $17 in savings. But they do more than that. They often find criminal elements and outright abuse of power. There is no price on that unless you're an American who sees it firsthand, and then it's priceless. The bill the committee considers today will strengthen the IG community by giving them additional tools that will allow them to follow the facts where they lead. For years, the IGs have asked us to extend their authority to issue subpoenas to get answers from government contractors and former Federal employees. Independent sources, including the Department of Justice, the National Procurement Task Force, and the Project on Government Oversight, have also urged Congress to expand the testimonial subpoena authority. The scholar Paul Light strongly endorsed such authority for IGs in his book called Monitoring Government: The Search for Accountability. He wrote, "To protect individual due process, limited testimonial subpoena power may be the kind of organizational enhancement that IGs need to accomplish their mission. With focus on making the case, not making the bust, testimonial subpoena power is a law enforcement tool the IGs increasingly need." H.R. 5492 provides expanded authority that IGs have asked for years, but some safeguards are in place in the bill to protect against possibility of a rogue IG that he might misuse that authority. The bill includes two separate reviews. First, by SIGI, the organization tasked to oversee all IGs, and then by the Department of Justice to make sure that a subpoena does not interfere with any ongoing investigation or criminal prosecution or cause other problems. The bill also improves the IG Act in several other ways. It creates more predictability for SIGI's budgeting by authorizing a direct appropriation to SIGI from Congress. And I emphasize, we authorize a direct appropriation. Appropriations will still be sought by another committee. The bill expedites investigations performed by SIGI's Integrity Committee and requires progress reports concerning ongoing investigation. It exempts the IG from the Computer Matching and Privacy Protection Act and Paperwork Reduction Act in order to allow them to work more efficiently. And it requires the GAO and SIGI to provide us with information about prolonged vacancies and cross-cutting issues that are making IGs less effective. The bill represents several months of fully bipartisan work, and it reflects the input of SIGI and other stakeholders. And for that, I want to personally thank the Ranking Member and Mr. Meadows, and of course, Mr. Lynch, who is with us today, because Mr. Cummings and Mr. Meadows are not only original co-sponsors, but they've put their staffs to work to help us in bringing the legislation before the committee today. And with that, I'd like to recognize the Ranking Member for his opening statement.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for introducing this legislation. The bill we are considering today is a result of a bipartisan discussion and negotiation. That's the way the legislative process should work, and I appreciate the Chairman's cooperation in working with Ranking Member Cummings and members of our side on this committee. The Inspector General Empowerment Act would provide important authorities to help the IGs do their jobs more efficiently and effectively. The bill would give Inspector Generals the ability to subpoena witnesses to testify, and that would be a significant new authority. Some members, including Ranking Member Cummings, have raised serious concerns about granting IGs this subpoena authority in the past. The concern was that there would be the potential for abuse, but I believe most IGs would act responsibly. It is important that we do include some safeguards in this legislation to protect against the possibility of an IG abusing unilateral power to issue subpoenas. So this bill includes several safeguards. First, the bill makes it clear that the IGs would not be authorized to subpoena the testimony of current Federal employees. Second, the bill would require an IG, before issuing a subpoena, to go through 2 reviews, as the Chairman has noted. The first review would be conducted by the Council of Inspectors General for Integrity and Efficiency. A panel of 3 Council members would have to approve the subpoena before the IG could issue it. The second review would be conducted by the Attorney General, who would have 10 days to object if the subpoena would interfere with an ongoing investigation. I believe the bill strikes a careful balance in granting the IGs with the authority to interview witnesses outside the government, while also providing these important checks against potential abuse. This bill would make needed reforms to the Council of Inspector Generals for Integrity and Efficiency. The process for investigating allegations of wrongdoing by Inspectors Generals, and that process can be painfully and unnecessarily slow. In a recent example, the National Archives Inspector General sat at home on administrative leave for almost 2 years, while the archivist waited to get a report from the Council. This bill would require the Integrity Committee to make an initial decision on whether to initiate an investigation within 60 days. And the bill would then require the Integrity Committee to conduct investigations within 6 months. If an investigation could not be completed in 6 months, the Integrity Committee would be required to notify the Committee and the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs immediately. The Inspector General Empowerment Act makes other improvements to provide IGs with timely access to information, such as exempting IGs from the Paperwork Reduction Act, as the Chairman has noted. I believe this bill will help the IGs do their work. I urge the committee to approve it, and I yield back the balance of our time.
I thank the gentleman. I'll hold the record open to the end of the day so that all members may submit written statements. Does any member wish to speak on the bill? Mr. Meadows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you personally for your leadership. Truly, as a strong supporter of the Inspector Generals myself, I believe that it's critically important that they have the tools necessary to effectively do their jobs. But it's not just them doing their jobs, it's really protecting the American people. And that's what we need to be mindful of. I've worked with multiple IGs firsthand and have seen the ways in which different Federal agencies have hindered the IG's efforts. This bipartisan legislation, as Mr. Lynch was just pointing out, is a much-needed tool for the IG community. Specifically, giving the IG's testimonial subpoena authority will ensure that current or former Federal employees and contractors will be held accountable during the investigation process. The current law, as you know, Mr. Chairman, only requires voluntary cooperation to IG audits and investigation, and has led to incomplete investigations and audits, and this is simply unacceptable. I think the message must be clear that the support for the IG's work is something that is bipartisan in nature, but it's also a critical component for our congressional oversight. I just want to commend the Chairman and the Ranking Member for their work on this legislation. I encourage all of the members of this committee to support it. I thank, obviously, the staff who has worked diligently as well, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. Does any member wish to offer an amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment or read the amendment.
Amendment to the Inspector General Empowerment Act of 2014, offered by Ms. Spear of California.
The amendment is being distributed, and the gentlelady is recognized to explain her amendment for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thank you for your introduction of this bill. Our Inspector Generals are Congress's watchdog for identifying waste, fraud, and abuse, yet their hard work is often ignored or never allowed to see the light of day. My amendment seeks to remedy this by requiring IG reports that confirm misconduct of high-level officials and general officers to be publicly released within 60 days of completion. It's a disservice to the American people when we discover that our relatively high-level Treasury Department officials use government resources to solicit prostitutes on Craigslist or accept golf fees and meals from bank executives while conducting bank examinations. It's a violation of the public trust when an assistant U.S. attorney lies to FBI agents about her husband's embezzlement activities, or an FBI agent who sexually harasses 17 employees, including 9 direct subordinates. None of these reports of misconduct saw the light of day until they were requested through the Freedom of Information Act requests. These investigations of individual misconduct, referred to as administrative investigations, are never proactively released. And in all of these incidences I listed, not one was fired or prosecuted. The public shouldn't have to depend on leaks for accountability. Taxpayers deserve to know when an agency's highest officials commit misconduct. Congress must uphold its duty in providing meaningful oversight over government agencies and demand accountability. And with that, I return the balance of my time.
I thank the gentlelady. I'll recognize myself briefly in support of the gentlelady's amendment. This amendment is similar to the one passed out of the House and included in the National Defense Authorization Act, and it's a good amendment. An example, in July, the Commerce Department Inspector General found that a high-ranking executive in the United States Patent and Trademark Office improperly used her position to ensure the hiring of a live-in boyfriend of an immediate family member. This and other types of activities from high-ranking officials, in fact, the American people, the public, has a right to know once the investigation has been completed. I think this is a good amendment. I commend Ms. Spear for her continued leadership in ensuring the public has a right to know what goes on behind closed doors in their government. And, of course, there are sufficient protections, including the 60-day period, to ensure that, in fact, what is done is done. So with that, I would recommend passage to all members. Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? The gentleman from Massachusetts recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very briefly, I support this amendment offered by Representative Spear. Also, I know that the Ranking Member Cummings as well supports this. This amendment would increase accountability and transparency for both agencies and Inspectors General. This amendment would require Inspectors General to publicly release those reports confirming misconduct by senior executive service employees, political appointees, or senior military officers. The amendment would make these reports of misconduct transparent, and it would also ensure that this increased transparency, that Inspector Generals continue to comply with the existing laws such as the Privacy Act. This is a good amendment, and I urge my colleagues to support it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. If no further members seek recognition, the question is on agreeing to the amendment offered by the gentlelady from California, Ms. Spear. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. In the opinion of all of us, including the Chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Are there any further amendments? There we go. If there are no further discussion and no further amendments, I move the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform report House Resolution 5492 to the House with the recommendation it do pass as amended. The question is on favorably reporting H.R. 5492 to the House. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. H.R. 5492, the Inspector General Empowerment Act, as amended, is ordered reported to the House. I ask unanimous consent that staff be authorized to make necessary and conforming technical changes to the bill. Without objection, so ordered. The committee will now consider H.R. 5229, the Wounded Warriors Federal Leave Act of 2014. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 5229, a bill to amend Title V United States Code to provide leave to any new Federal employee who is a veteran with a service-connected disability rated at 30% or more for purposes of undergoing medical treatment for such disability and for other purposes.
Without objection, H.R. 5229 will be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. The text has already been distributed and is in each of your folders. H.R. 5229 supports wounded warriors' transition to civilian careers by providing newly hired disabled veterans access to sick leave to care for the injuries related to their service. H.R. 5229 allows newly hired veterans access to sick leave for medical treatment related to their service-connected disabilities. Under current law, full-time Federal employees accrue 4 hours of sick leave every 2 weeks, totaling 13 days of sick leave per year. Since Federal employees begin with a zero sick leave balance, disabled veterans beginning civilian jobs often have insufficient sick leave to attend medical appointments required for treatment of their service-connected disabilities. As a result, they must often take unpaid leave to care for these injuries. Under 5229, first-year Federal employees with a service-connected disability rating of 30% or greater would have up to 13 days of sick leave for the purpose of undergoing medical treatment related to their disability. I commend the Ranking Member, Mr. Lynch, for his leadership on this issue and for working with Mr. Farenthold, the Ranking Mr. Farenthold and the Ranking Member, Mr. Cummings, who introduced this bipartisan legislation as part of the committee's commitment to disabled veteran health care. And with that, I would recognize the Ranking Member for his opening statement.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank you personally, as well as Ranking Member Cummings and Chairman Farenthold, and also Walter Jones. We have a lot of Republican support for this bill. I am very proud to have it. And all the continued efforts in support of H.R. 5229, the Wounded Warriors Federal Leave Act. I would also like to thank the various veteran service and Federal employee and manager organizations that have strongly endorsed this legislation on behalf of our veterans with disabilities who are entering the Federal workforce. These include the VFW, the American Legion, the Disabled American Veterans, and the Federal Postal Coalition, an organization representing nearly 5 million Federal and postal workers and annuitants. The UPS, the United States Postal Service, is an aggressive hirer of our veterans. Let me also thank personally Lena Chang of the Democratic staff and Jennifer Hemingway of the Republican staff for their good work in support of this bill. Pursuant to Title V of the United States Code, full-time Federal employees accrue 4 hours of paid sick leave for every pay period. That is a maximum of 104 hours of paid sick leave per year. However, while Federal workers may carry over any unused annual sick leave from year to year, as the Chairman has pointed out, a first-year Federal employee will begin his or her career in the Federal workforce with sick leave balance of 0 hours. So they come out of the service, in many cases recently, coming back from multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. They come back, they are hired by the Federal employees at the very point where they have the most need of medical care, many suffering from PTSD. They have 0 hours in their Federal sick leave bank, so they must take unpaid sick leave to have their medical issues addressed. This lack of initial leave for Federal workers in their first year on the job is particularly onerous on our new Federal employees who are also wounded warriors and must make regular visits to the VA medical facilities in order to receive treatment for their service-connected disabilities. As reported by the Veterans of Foreign Wars, this means that newly hired disabled veterans must choose between taking unpaid leave to seek care for their injuries or foregoing receiving that care altogether." Close quote. The Federal Managers Association further notes that its members have witnessed young men and women who struggle with available leave as they attempt to keep service-related medical necessary appointments, which puts undue stress on both those managers and the Federal employees as they try to meet their congressionally mandated missions and goals. Several Wounded Warrior Federal employees highlighted this difficulty during a conference call with my staff in June of this year. These workers reported that, absent sufficient accrued sick leave, they had often made the difficult decision to regularly skip their scheduled VA appointments, particularly in light of the extended travel time required to visit the VA in certain areas of our country. In order to better ensure that we afford our newly hired veterans with disabilities the flexibility and opportunity to continue their medical treatment as they transition to careers in the Federal workforce, I have introduced H.R. 5229, the Wounded Warriors Federal Leave Act of 2014, with Ranking Member Cummings, Chairman Farenthold, Representative G.K. Butterfield, and Walter Jones as original co-sponsors. This legislation would provide first-year Federal employees with a VA disability rating of 30% or greater with 104 hours of Wounded Warrior leave for the purpose of undergoing medical treatment for their service-connected disabilities. Eligible Federal employees could make use of this leave by simply submitting their certification to their agency in a manner that will be prescribed by the Office of Personnel Management within 6 months of enactment. Moreover, our legislation recognizes that these dedicated Federal workers will have accumulated up to 104 hours of traditional sick leave by the end of their first year on the job, and accordingly, H.R. 5229 also provides that any unused Wounded Warrior leave would not carry over to the second year. In light of the jurisdiction of this committee over Title V of the United States Code, this legislation covers all Title V agencies, or 85% of the Federal workforce, including our largest Federal employer of veterans, the Department of Defense, and the United States Postal Service. I would note that Mr. Butterfield of North Carolina has recently introduced complementary legislation, which I have co-sponsored, to provide additional coverage for newly hired Wounded Warriors in the Federal workforce. Mr. Chairman, I thank you again for your help in moving this legislation through committee, and I look forward to working with you to ensure that it receives prompt consideration on the House floor. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support H.R. 5229, and I yield back the balance of our time.
Thank you. I will hold the record open until the end of the day so that all members who would like to submit written statements may. Does any member wish to speak on the bill? Mr. Farenthold.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to associate myself with the remarks of my ranking member, Mr. Lynch. This is incredibly important legislation. We've had our wounded warriors coming to work into the Federal workforce and not being able to have the paid leave necessary to get the treatment that they need. It's not like this is an unreasonable request. It's not like these wounded warriors have not been working for the American people since they enlisted. It's just a quirk of the employment law. You don't accrue the leave in the first year. But we're going to give it to them with this legislation so that they can get the treatment that they need. And it's my hope that they'll take advantage of it and won't spend too much time waiting in the VA. That's another issue, obviously, that this Congress is addressing. We have a obligation to those who have risked their lives for this country, and especially to those who have suffered a disability as a result of their service. I'm proud to be a original co-sponsor, co-author of this legislation, and yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Well, just very briefly, first I want to thank Mr. Lynch and also Chairman Farenthold for their work on this legislation. This is a small bill that will make a big difference. As the Chairman also pointed out, people forget that our veterans have been Federal employees, and this is a quirk in the legislation that needs to be, or in the law that needs to be addressed by legislation. So I commend you on making certain those with disabilities and treatment now get the sick leave that they deserve, and they are Federal employees, both as veterans and in their new Federal positions. I yield back and thank you again.
Thank the gentleman. Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Does anyone wish to offer an amendment? If there is no further discussion, I move the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform report H.R. 5229 to the House with the recommendation it do pass. The question is on favor of reporting H.R. 5229 to the House. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. H.R. 5229, the Wounded Warriors Federal Leave Act of 2014, is ordered reported to the House, and I'd ask unanimous consent that the staff may make technical and conforming changes if necessary. Without objection, so ordered. If you seek recognition, just go for it.
My apologies, Mr.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't happen in the hearing, we're good.
Holy cow. Change that ring. Maybe like whoosh or something.
The committee will now consider the following postal namings en bloc: H.R. 5142, H.R. 5331, H.R. 5386, and H.R. 5468. It is my intention to consider these bills by unanimous consent. Does any member wish to speak on the bill?
Just briefly.
Okay.
They just gave me a small question.
Okay, I'll recognize the ranking member first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Accordingly, the ranking member and members of the committee have reviewed the post office naming bills before us and agree that these bills meet the committee's requirements, and we support these bills and yield back the balance of our time.
I thank the gentleman. I briefly recognize myself. H.R. 5468 seeks to name a post office on what's called main side of Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton after the numerous Medal of Honor recipients from the units that have deployed from Camp Pendleton. This is a postal naming in my district, and it's a postal naming that is not unheard of, but slightly different than the usual naming of individuals. The Medal of Honor is our nation's highest award for valor and heroism, often only received posthumously. Servicemen or servicewomen due to the extreme act of heroism and selflessness. The stories of Medal of Honor recipients truly are magnificent and worthy of review by every citizen in our country, as some have given their lives in a valiant way to protect our freedoms. We would be honoring well-known heroes like Gunnery Sergeant John Bastalone, who fought so valiantly during World War II, or, in fact, Colonel William Barber, who received his Medal of Honor for actions at the historic Battle of Chosin Reservoir in the Korean War. With over 250 Medal of Honor awards to Marines, many of those recipients have trained, spent time, and were stationed at Camp Pendleton throughout their service to our country. It is my hope that in naming not after one fallen hero, not after one valiant Marine, but after all of those Marines for their heroism, that I will be doing what is appropriate uniquely at Camp Pendleton. Because since the early days of World War II, when Camp Pendleton was converted from a ranch to a training base for Marines, Marines and Navy corpsmen have had ties to Camp Pendleton as they deployed around the world. No naming of a post office at Camp Pendleton could be done for a postmaster. No naming of no naming of the post office at Camp Pendleton could be done for a sailor or a Marine, and not do inherently an injustice for the so many who have served. It is my intention that when named, this post office will display, both inside and out, the names and, in fact, the acts of these brave Marines and Navy corpsmen, so that people entering the post office, Marines and civilians, will be able to flip through and see in a book what is the history of Camp Pendleton and those who have served. And for that reason, I would hope that all would support it. At this point, I will note that a quorum is not yet present. We will take a short recess until a quorum is present. Does the gentleman seek recognition? Okay, then we'll stand in recess for just a few minutes until we have a full quorum. I now ask unanimous consent that the committee favorably report the aforementioned bills in block. Without objection, so ordered. The committee stands adjourned.